2020 has been a year filled with disruptions and uncertainties. Nothing is left untouched. The way we live, work, and think have all changed. Facing all the challenges, science has never been more important than now. So we've organized this forum, Science in an Uncertain World. And I'm pleased to be gathered by some scientists from young rising stars to top academicians and even Nobel laureates. And we'll also be joined by audiences here in our studio. Thank you all for joining us. And warm welcome to everybody joining our discussion today. Thank you. But first, let me introduce you our distinguished guest. Next is Huai Jingpeng, Chief Executive Secretary and Vice President of the China Association for Science and Technology and Academician of the Chinese Academy of Sciences.
Distinguished Mr. Zhang Boli, President Gong Ke, Director Sun, Honorable Academicians, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good evening. Thank you for attending this themed TV forum of the 2020 World Conference on Science Literacy. On behalf of the China Association for Science and Technology, I would like to extend our welcome and gratitude to the guests, representatives from different social sectors, and friends in the media attending this event online. In September 2018, when the conference was held for the first time, President Xi Jinping sent a congratulatory letter pointing out a direction for international cooperation on science literacy. 2 years on, to implement this spirit, we have deepened international cooperation and exchanges, improved the public's understanding of science and policy consultation, and taken China's openness and partnerships with other countries to a new height. The fifth plenary session of the 19th CPC Central Committee mapped out a new blueprint for China's future development, which puts innovation at the heart of all our endeavors, gives particular prominence to the improvement of people's moral quality, science and cultural quality, and physical and mental health quality, proposes a more open development pattern featuring domestic and international dual circulation, and allows technology to better serve the well-being of humanity. The COVID-19 pandemic this year has dealt a heavy blow to the world, but at the same time, it has further accentuated the significance of the profound synergy between science and the development of economy, society, culture, and ecological civilization for the advancement of human civilization. It is more and more obvious that science and technology play an indispensable role in improving science literacy, raising public awareness on science, tackling major risks and challenges, and promoting economic and social development in the post-pandemic era. In all, science literacy is a bedrock for social development and governance. Science and technology development hinges upon people, so their science literacy lies at the heart and center of the advancement of humanity, sustainable development, and mutual learning among civilizations. A public with good science literacy is the greatest driving force for technology to deliver social good and a prerequisite for good law and good governance. COVID-19 is a disaster, but it has also created an opportunity for science to be promoted among the general public. During the pandemic, the entire Chinese society respects, trusts, and makes good use of science, and always turns to science to find solutions to problems. This science-based social ethos has paved the way for effective pandemic control. So, improving the science literacy of people across the globe through concerted efforts made by the international community will bring benefit to every human being in every corner of the world, and will also be conducive to sustainable development and a betterment of our ability to meet global challenges. Science education and popularization is key to the public's understanding of science. The science and technology community has the responsibility of promoting science among the general public. Government policies that aim to propel scientific development should not only stress the importance of science education, make knowledge power, and build people's psychological resilience to help them overcome fear, but should also attach importance to the introduction of scientific methods and outlooks, improve people's ability to apply scientific knowledge in practice, and encourage them to pursue new knowledge through scientific methods. In addition, these policies should also advocate the scientific spirit that enables people to seek truth, tell right from wrong, and identify false information. Openness and cooperation is a theme of our times. The pandemic has made people more keenly aware of the fact that all countries are in the same boat and rise and fall together, and that only through solidarity and cooperation can we meet challenges. We should keep promoting science and celebrate its truth-seeking and benevolent nature to build a truth-centered academic community, a virtue-centered value system, and a people-centered community of common destiny. Let's keep technology side by side with the welfare of humanity and let it light the way for a new era of human civilization. Let's join hands to build an even brighter future for mankind. I wish the forum a complete success. Thank you.
And next, let's hear a message from Mr. Sheng Haixiong. He's the president and editor-in-chief of the China Media Group.
Distinguished Secretary Huai Jinpeng, dear guests and friends, good evening. Welcome to the Scientific Literacy and Global Challenge Forum, jointly organized by China Association for Science and Technology and CGTN think tank. On behalf of China Media Group, I would like to thank all the academicians, experts, and guests who attended the forum on site and online. President Xi Jinping once said we should place the popularization of science on the same level of importance as scientific and technological innovation. Popularize scientific knowledge, promote the spirit of science, spread scientific ideas, and advocate scientific methods, and create a science-friendly environment in society where people believe in science, love science, learn science, and use science. Since the promulgation and implementation of the outline of the National Scheme for Scientific Literacy in 2006, China has continuously increased the intensity, breadth, and depth of scientific popularization by encouraging engagement in educational programs of people across society, thereby significantly raising the level of scientific literacy among its citizens. During the 13th five-year plan period, the share of Chinese citizens with scientific literacy increased from 6.2% in 2015 to over 10% in 2020, tremendously narrowing the gap with major developed countries. China is committed to creating a fertile ground for the popularization of science and continuously improving the scientific literacy of nearly one-fifth of the world's population. This will help unleash China's enormous momentum in scientific and technological innovation so that China can make a greater contribution to the development of human society. To improve the scientific literacy of the general public, we should create an environment where science is respected, trusted, and relied upon. The sudden outbreak of COVID-19 has once again shown that human beings are a community with a shared future. However, amid the major public health emergency, rumors with no scientific evidence went rampant, such as disinfectant injection kills coronavirus and 5G causes coronavirus. We need to use science to close gaps and dispel rumors. While some countries are still debating whether to wear masks, 1.4 billion Chinese have worn masks conscientiously under the scientific guidelines for disease prevention and control. It is a civil consensus and conscious action based on citizen scientific literacy, and the importance of science in pandemic response has been highlighted in an unprecedented way. To improve people's scientific literacy, it is necessary to strengthen the cooperation between the media and the scientific community. Media is an important channel for the public to obtain scientific information and an important platform for advocating scientific methods, spreading scientific ideas, and promoting the spirit of science. China Media Group adopting the 5G plus 4K and 8K plus AI strategy to promote the deep integration of different forms of media with the help of science and technology. We will improve our ability to use new media to drive the popularization of science and technology. CMG and CAST have made meaningful attempts to popularize science and technology, including the launch of a daily program, Get to the Facts, on CCTV Channel 13, and the launch of a series of branded programs such as Best Minds in Science on CCTV1's Life Circle. CGTN think tank will also step up cooperation with CAST to promote the spread of Chinese science and technology on the global arena. Science knows no borders. Even though researchers from different countries speak different languages, they can still communicate with each other on a specific field of scientific research. Therefore, the consensus formed on scientific truths is the basic discourse shared by all mankind. It is undeniable, however, that under geopolitical influence, the world is now facing a number of complex and serious challenges, such as the politicization of science. Therefore, it is more important than ever for mankind to strengthen cooperation in science and move forward in solidarity. Addressing global challenges is not only the responsibility of politicians and elites, but also the shared mission of scientifically literate media, scientists, and the general public. The recently concluded 5th plenary session of the 19th CPC Central Committee made a comprehensive plan for China's development during the 14th five-year plan period, and a significant increase in people's scientific and cultural literacy is one of the goals in the plan. Raising the level of scientific literacy of people around the world requires the responsible participation of every country, as well as extensive global cooperation to provide effective solutions to global issues such as climate change and other environmental challenges. As a mainstream media, China Media Group will do all that it can to act as a bridge between different stakeholders in the era of media integration, actively engage in the popularization of science, and make greater contribution to improving scientific literacy for all through effective dissemination and broad coverage of science contents. I wish this forum a great success. To all the scientists, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shen, for your message. Well, in 2020, there's one person whose name is on the lips of every Chinese. His dedication and integrity as a scientist has inspired many Chinese, and his efforts to contain COVID-19 has made the world a better place. Now, let's welcome Zhong Nanshan, academician of the Chinese Academy of Engineering and the laureate of the Medal of the Republic.
Your Excellencies, dear friends, good evening. It is a great pleasure for me to attend today's TV forum jointly held by the China Association for Science and Technology and CGTN. Early this year, the COVID-19 pandemic broke out. With the staunch leadership of our national government and through community-based and society-wide prevention and control measures, we have achieved initial victory in the fight against the virus. As we speak, the pandemic is still advancing across the globe, putting China's prevention and control system under enormous pressure. To date, over 62 million people worldwide have contracted the virus, among which 1.46 million have died. Some major countries are facing a dire situation where over 160,000 or 170,000 new confirmed cases are added to the total tally each day. China has implemented very stringent intervention measures. Following the principle of saving lives is of paramount importance, we have introduced this community-based and society-wide anti-pandemic strategy to bring the crisis under control within 4 weeks, and nationwide infections plateaued within 2 months. From early March to date, our total confirmed cases have risen at a relatively mild rate, from around 80,000 to 93,000, an increase of 13,000 in 8 months. While some other countries have seen their COVID-19 counts surge by more than 100,000 in just 1 day. This paved the way for the resumption of work, production, and school in China, and is inextricably linked to the judicious guiding principles and measures that we have adopted. Although the pandemic now is well contained in China, many fundamental questions regarding science regarding it are still unanswered. For example, the origin of the virus. Another key question is about the route of transmission, more specifically, object-to-human transmission. Human-to-human transmission is well understood, but the virus spread from objects such as packaging and cold chain products to humans, and its transmission in closed spaces are not handled effectively. In the meantime, not much progress has been made in the development of effective medicines, either modern or traditional, for COVID-19, nor is there any antibody treatment that works perfectly for severe cases. The development of vaccines in many countries, including China, has yielded preliminary results, which are proved to be effective, but it will take a fair amount of time before they are ready for clinical use, particularly mass vaccination. All these issues need to be addressed urgently. President Xi stressed the importance of placing innovation at the center of China's modernization drive. Further to that, he expressed his hope for scientists to look toward the main economic battlegrounds, look toward the global frontiers of science and technology, look forward major national needs, and look forward the people's lives and health. Biomedicine is actually a crucial part of looking towards the people's lives and health. People working in this area should take innovative approaches to better safeguard people's health, as well as prevent and control diseases. In this regard, of particular importance are early detection, early diagnosis, and early treatment, which is also where we are heading in the future. In other words, we should aim to shift our primary focus from the treatment of disease to the maintenance of health. Finally, I wish the forum a complete success. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhong's insights. Indeed, innovation is key for the future of humanity. But what else is needed for us in this uncertain world? We will hear some insights and perspectives from world-renowned scientists. Now, let's take a look at this.
Science shapes our knowledge of the universe, and by giving us greater understanding of all that surrounds us, allows us to make better decisions. As countries grapple with the fallout of COVID-19, global uncertainty is on the rise, and distrust of science is growing.
The very fact that a public health message to save lives triggers such venom and animosity to me that it results in real and credible threats to my life and my safety.
What challenges will scientists face, and what role should they play in public health crises? The future of humanity depends on the younger generation. How should we foster scientific thinking among young people in order to promote science, technology, and innovation for social development? And what is needed to support science education that fosters the spirit of science and enhances its ability to benefit humankind?
And now I'm very honored to be joined by Dr. Gong Ke. He is the president of the World Federation of Engineering Organization. While the younger generation of scientists, many people say, are the driving force behind science undertaking. We will hear your opinions on how to nurture talents in this world. But first, let's hear what Nobel laureate has to say. This is 2013 chemistry laureate Michael Levitt.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Levitt. I'm a professor of structural and computational biology at Stanford University in California. I'm in the Department of Structural Biology in Stanford Medical School. I've been an independent scientist since I was 20 years old. That's 53 years ago. And that's a very young age to become an independent scientist. But I think anybody who is a scientist can become independent young. And I think being independent young is very important. So let me just say a little bit about my own life. I started out working on the structure of proteins. And most of my work has been about how proteins move, how DNA moves. It's the way a molecule moves, something that is called a trajectory. Now, other things also move and have trajectories. An epidemic moves. The number of cases increases with time. The number of deaths increases with time. So every epidemic, in some ways, has a trajectory. And when I first heard about the outbreak in Wuhan, in the end of January, I basically started to look at the outbreak. I focused on it and quite quickly realized that, like a dynamical object, it was slowing down. It wasn't accelerating, it was slowing down, it was coming to an end. This allowed me to feel really confident by the last week of February that things would be fine in Wuhan and indeed all of China. But meanwhile, the virus started up in Iran, then South Korea, Iran, Italy, and in fact, although most places in the world seem now to be past the virus, there is still new activity. There's been a lot of interest in China's big trading partners, countries like Germany and Europe and the United States. In the United States, the virus finally does seem to be coming under control. I think after we see the results of the US election, everything will quieten down and we will know where the virus is going. So now let me, in the last part of my talk, say something about something that for me is my greatest passion. I have realized that the future belongs to young people. That might seem so obvious because we think, and we also have lots of respect for old people, but old people are not what's driving science. The work I got my Nobel Prize for was done when I was 20 and 21. Later on, it didn't really matter. So we have to let young people do important science. And the way we have to do this is by giving them confidence in their independence. They should study with great people, but they should be independent from the beginning. They should have their ideas. They should be able to do their work. New ideas come from young people. The great advances in technology, the great founders of startup companies, whether it's Apple or Microsoft or Wishing or Alibaba, all came from very young people. And it's important to remember that the young people are the people that are driving the future. Now, how do you encourage young people? Firstly, you let them be curious. Young people need to be curious. Every young person is naturally curious. You mustn't kill the curiosity. You must let the young people do what they want to do, to have ideas. And also, it's very important to realize that if you're doing science, you are wrong. A good scientist is wrong 90% of the time, and a really good scientist is wrong 99% of the time. So this is a very important thing to remember. If you can't be wrong, you cannot do great science. If you are right all the time, you're not doing great science, you're doing easy science. Science is about discovering very, very difficult things and making those things available to everybody. Everybody can do this. China has a real advantage in this area. It's the country with more young people than any other country in the world, probably by a factor of 4 or 5. That's a huge advantage. Those young people are the treasure of future China and should be regarded as such. Thank you very much.
We're now joined by Professor Gong. Professor Gong, Professor Levitt mentioned a very important point. What is the role of young scientists? Obviously, young scientists are catching up and they want to take the batons from more accomplished scientists. So what do you think of the roles of the young scientists? Many of them are sitting here today.
As just mentioned by Michael, the driving force for the scientific advancement is a young scientist, the really young scientists, under 40, even under 35, as demonstrated by himself.
Yeah. He made a discovery in 20.
In 20 and 21. So, but I think it is also worth to note that so-called wave ahead. Now in the website we talk about the wave behind. The young scientists,
Chinese.
后浪, yes. But the wave ahead, 前浪, yeah. Some of them, or many of them, are still standing in front of scientist advancement, just as shown by Professor Zhong Nanshan, and we'll talk later, Professor Zhang Boli. They are the wave ahead, but they're still keeping in the front line.
But what is the cooperation between accomplished scientists and young aspiring scientists? Who should be doing more? Who should be supporting whom?
I support the idea proposed by Michael. We should give opportunities, more opportunities to the young scientists. Let them stand alone, to work independently and to keep free thinking, and to support their research. That is the duty of the accomplished scientists.
Yeah. And we average person don't understand how scientists do their work every day. Can you tell us what is the major difference of being a scientist from being an average person?
I think Michael has mentioned about this. He said scientists do 90%, even 99% things wrong. The ordinary people, they are working based on what we know. That's the so-called knowledge. But scientists, they are working on what we do not know. They try errors and repeatedly. And from this way, they explore the truth. But for ordinary people, they take every means to avoid failure.
Okay.
I think that's the difference in the way of working.
And so for people who don't get exposed to science every day, why do they have science literacy? Why do they have to increase their science literacy?
That's a very good question. As previous speaker mentioned several times, in everyday life, or especially in the time of crisis like COVID-19, we need science-based social measures, such as to wear a mask, keep social distance, and even take quarantine. But these social measures requires, if we implement efficiently, they need broad public support. That should be based on understanding of science. That is science literacy.
And earlier, President Shen Haixiong of China Media Group mentioned that the Chinese people's science literacy actually increased from 6 to 10% in just a matter of 5 years.
Yeah.
What do you think is the driving force behind the hike of science literacy here in China?
You know, 10% is still very low. It's still not high.
Not as high as the advanced countries in the world.
Not as high as we expected. So I think that in the past years, the scientific community, like CAST, China Association of Science and Technology, supported by the Chinese government, and supported by all scientists, technologists, engineers, we worked hard to promote science literacy, such as this conference we carried out today. That's the second time or third time. We keep working on popularize the scientific facts, concepts, process, to increase the awareness of the public about these scientific facts, rules, and so on and so forth.
Is it difficult?
It's not that easy. It's not that easy. You know, because of the uncertainty of scientific research, because of the relativity of the so-called scientific truth, so there's always something wrong, and people question scientific achievements.
Yeah.
So I think that is the responsibility of science and engineers to help people to answer these questions, to respond to the public concern of scientific innovation, and to help them to understand the way of scientific works. Scientific conclusions is falsifiable. That is a very important rule of science, but that means scientists is being always ready to
correct himself or herself.
Correct himself. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Professor
you.
Gong.
Thank you. Yeah.
And scientists have also gone to the front to fight COVID in 2020. Now let's hear another Nobel laureate, Peter Doherty, and his perspective on this.
I'm Peter Doherty. I'm a professor at the University of Melbourne in Australia, and I've worked for decades on viruses and immunity. My colleague Rolf Zinckernagel and I were awarded the Nobel Prize in 1996 for our work on cellular immunity, which has been my specific interest since then. COVID-19 is an international catastrophe in many ways. It's causing enormous societal damage and enormous economic damage, more so in some countries than others. But I think we need to understand, this is a coronavirus, okay? Now, before the year 2000, there were 2 coronaviruses circulating in human populations. We'd known about them for a long time. They were in the group of viruses that causes seasonal respiratory infections, common colds, croup in little kids, and so forth. Now, and there are hundreds of viruses like that, but there were 2 coronaviruses in that mix. Now, since the year 2000, we have had 5 coronaviruses cross over, probably from bats, maybe through an intermediate species, into human beings. You experienced the first SARS virus in China. We didn't get that. It didn't get as far as Australia, but it was distributed in East Asia and it got to Toronto. And then we have the Middle Eastern respiratory syncytial virus, started in the Middle East. Probably someone got infected, a bat infected a dromedary camel, and maybe someone who races camels kissed the camel. They do kiss their camels, and contracted it. And we have a disease which is still spreading, highly lethal. The MERS virus came across in 2013, I think it was, and it kills about 30% of people and infects. But fortunately, it is not as infectious as SARS-CoV-2, the COVID-19 virus. So there are those 2 viruses that have remained in the sort of Europe-Asia thing, except for the original SARS getting to Toronto, and that original virus is burnt out. But the other 4 viruses are still circulating. And among those viruses, apart from COVID-19 and SARS-CoV-2, there are 2 common cold viruses, came across in 2004, one in the Netherlands, one in Hong Kong, and they are now global infections in human beings. So what is this telling us? What it's telling us is that with the change in economic circumstances, particularly in Asia, with the massive ramp up of international air travel by very large numbers of people, we are at major risk of further pandemics. And we need to use COVID-19 and this experience as a learning exercise. And we need to study it very, very carefully and get global agreements on things that need to be done. And one of them would, of course, be stopping the planes very early on. We didn't do that because the whole of the viral immunity community was thinking in terms of the influenza mantra. And that mantra, I've been involved in influenza research for years, is that you cannot stop a respiratory pathogen like flu by stopping the planes. But you can. We've stopped COVID-19 in Australia and New Zealand. We're island states, so we're better able to do that, but we stopped the plane. So that's one of the things we need to think about. The other thing we need to think about is that vaccines and monoclonal antibodies and all these wonderful things that we develop with our technology, and it takes us about a year to do that. Not to make the product. We can make that very, very fast. but to test it to make sure that it's safe. And that's why it's taken so long to get the vaccines out. But what we could have done is develop antiviral drugs, because we've got antiviral drugs that hit all influenza viruses. We've got antiviral drugs that hit all the AIDS-type retroviruses. We should have been making antiviral drugs that hit all the coronaviruses and the couple of other types of viruses that are out there, in bats particularly, that could cross over into us. So I think there are things we should do. We should not think this is going to be the last pandemic for 100 years. We're going to be confronting these issues much more regularly if we go back to our practices before this happened.
Peter Doherty, as Peter mentioned, probably COVID-19 is a serious public health crisis, and we should stop the pathogen early on. And to do that, to have early diagnostic is very important. So we have Dr. Tan Wei-Hong. Your team has invented a diagnostic kit that can give results within an hour, and it can be applied in a non-medical setting like airport. And that is important for testing. But I want your take on, as Peter mentioned, COVID-19 is not the first pandemic. It will not be the last. But what we have learned from COVID-19 2020.
Of course, as Peter mentioned, we have learned a lot. And I think this will come again and again. And because of the, this whole world lives in a same village, more or less. And I think, the whole society have learned a lot. And from the government point of view, how to report those kind of cases on time. And what is the reporting channel? This has a lot of confusion in the very beginning of this pandemic, no matter whether in China or in US or in any other countries. And there are some issues there the government has to sort out how to get this information correct, and the full information is really disclosed. Then the leaders can make their decisions. So from the government point of view. And then, of course, another issue is why China is doing better is because China has this central government can lead all people and can do things if government, put the orders out. So all other countries around the world should probably learn something from China, just how to, when you face this kind of pandemic situation, and how to make people to listen to the government. And from the that's a public point of view, and a few people and Professor Fai also mentioned, we really have to do a much better public education. Let the public really understand this is a serious issue. And I think my sons are both in the U.S. and 5 months ago when I talked to them, they didn't really feel this is serious. And so of course, as time goes, they really now feel okay. They have, we have to do a better job in public education, and also get rid of all these rumors. And so that's another issue on the public education. And then on the medical side, as this Peter mentioned, we have to prepare much better drug, antiviral drug. It's not only for one type, but can be easily changed for another if such a case comes again. Yeah. And that's, that's one side. The other side is how to mobilize all the doctors to where there is a need. Of course, in China, we are doing a very good job. When Wuhan was in serious situation, 50 Wuhan basically came to Wuhan to help, and then put this whole thing behind us. So that's from the medical point of view, and then from the research scientific community. And we have to really thinking about why it took so long for us to develop a testing kit or a vaccine or a drug. And so
you said it's too long, but maybe people will say this is unprecedentedly quick, because within months we came up with testing like what you did.
I know, but still, from the testing point of view, I think you are right. But from the drug and from the vaccine point of view, it's very, very long, right? And from the testing point of view, of course, it's mainly about the timing, right? Now it takes about 4 to 5 hours for the regular PCR type, and the things we did in our lab is to make it to about 40 minutes. And this can be used in airport in situations where there is a need. Then the last one is the biomedical industry. I think we have to build probably better platforms, and the biomedical industry can really be prepared for those kind of antiviral drug and antiviral vaccine. And so then when such a pandemic comes again, and then we can...
Are you an optimist? Next pandemic, when it comes, we're better prepared with antiviral medicines?
We are much unsure. We will be much better prepared, because, as Peter mentioned, SARS did do us a lot of harm, but not as much as this COVID-19.
Right.
This whole world. So forgetting the past, well, definitely we are going to,
repeat the same mistake.
Repeat the same mistake. And then actually, even in China, I mean, many people saying that okay, SARS happened 13 years ago, but we didn't really, once it's gone, and we didn't really put much of attention to it anymore.
Okay.
So that's the lesson.
Hopefully we have a longer memory this time. Thank you very much. COVID-19 has obviously spread across the world to the surprise and dismay of the world. And so has false information. And our next Nobel laureate, Randy Schekman, has this to say about misinformation.
Okay, welcome to my friends in Beijing. My name is Randy Schekman. I'm a professor of molecular and cell biology and an investigator of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute at the University of California, Berkeley. I'm pleased to begin the forum that you are participating in. Public acceptance of vaccination. That is a very serious issue in this country and elsewhere. Well, there are many different conspiracy theories that have been circulating from ill-informed sources. Some of them believe that there are negative reactions. Some of them have made up negative reactions, such as this claim that vaccination is somehow connected to autism. That is simply not true, but people believe these things. There are anecdotal examples of people become ill after they're vaccinated, but it's not very rarely proven that the vaccine had anything to do with the illness. And then there are some people who think that the companies, the major pharmaceutical companies, are looking to just make billions of dollars, or influential people like Bill Gates, may have caused the virus so that he could make more money. I mean, Bill Gates has so much money. There's no reason that he'd ever want more money than this. So all these things are just, frankly, ridiculous. And I think people need to look to respected authorities to recognize who has the knowledge of the facts in this case. And in the U.S., it's someone like Anthony Fauci. And in China, they're equally leaders of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, who are recognized authorities in epidemiology and who can be counted on to make factual statements about these things. And people should simply learn who are the ones who have the knowledge, and to ignore those who are, making up things. The benefits of science and medical advances are incredible. I mean, in the past 20 years, through our deep understanding of the human body, we have very effective treatments now for heart disease and increasingly powerful techniques to stall the development or advance of cancer. These diseases are still the major killers in the world, but we've made such progress on it, and it's all because of a deep insight into the chemical and biochemical reactions in the cells of our body. This is done by people who spend their lives studying these details, and scientists generally only care about trying to prove or trying to support a view or to attack some other theory with more evidence. And this process of scientific discovery is what has allowed civilization to advance in the last several centuries, and why people would choose to reject that in favor of people who know nothing is really hard to understand. Really hard to understand. I'd like to know from my friends in China what the young people feel their prospects are in taking positions, either in in universities or in research institutes or in the biotechnology companies. In the U.S., especially now with the pandemic, job opportunities in academic science will be very limited because universities have lost a lot of money. On the other hand, the job opportunities in biotechnology and in the pharmaceutical industry are growing dramatically. This pandemic will actually be a boost for those industries. And so now, unlike in the past, many of my graduate students and postdoctoral fellows want to go into biotechnology. They're less interested in going into academic jobs. So what I would like to know in China is if the same thing is true there. Are there many opportunities in academic jobs?
So Professor Sheckman asked a very interesting question. What is the case now in China? We have many young scientists joining me here today. Who would like to answer his question? Okay, that gentleman over there. So his question is it still a good choice to pursue a career in academia?
Thank you. I'm Chen Kanling from China Institute, Fudan University. I think that we can find careers and jobs, but it's difficult to find good jobs and suitable jobs. Maybe we can answer the question from the perspective of political system. China's experience is if the political power, the social power, and the capital power can be balanced well, we will fight against strong enemies such as COVID-19 and other challenges. Actually, many youngsters like us, scientists and scholars, we are eager to help others, and we find that our government, our market, and our society are forming joint force to let different talents play their suitable roles. I think that's our promising future. Thank you.
That is a very interesting answer, and also answers Mr. Sheckman's question. That gentleman sitting next.
Okay, thank you.
So can you find a career now in 2020? Is it harder or easier?
I think it's hard. Frankly, it's very hard. How to say, you know, at the beginning of this year, our scientific research is strongly disturbed by the COVID-19. So many of our students, nearly all of our students, can't go to the laboratory, and all our field trips are cancelled, you know. But I want to say here, thanks our country, our government.
Probably China is a better case than elsewhere.
China is great. Our government is great. We control the virus very fast, so fast. So now China is very safe. But I'm sorry to say our world is still in the problem of COVID-19. So this year, many of our students are excellent students, can't go to USA, UK, or Europe. So they need to find job in China. I think that is the reason. Thank you.
Okay. And also a question he asked is that, is it easier or is it more interesting to find a job in businesses or in research institutions? Because obviously businesses pay better.
Thanks. I'm working in the Chinese Academy of Science, and as for a member of the younger generation, as for myself, I still more prefer to find a job in public institute or universities, because even during the outbreak response period, so the Chinese government are still trying very hard and take measures to maintain the research funding and even increase the research funding in special field, for example, the biology and the medical and health service. So, and compared to the business, including the large business, we couldn't make a good salary as this kind of large companies. But in my opinion, these companies are much more benefit-oriented. So small business, they are more innovative, but during the difficult situation, it's more easier to be unemployed. So as a younger generation as a member of the younger scientists. So we are having a much more broad horizon. We would like to take our responsibility to stimulate the whole development of science and technology in the modern China. And so as we can see, the scientists, they have doing great contribution to anti the coronavirus, and even are doing a lot of work to become the top leading level. So as for myself, so I would like to realize my own value of life. Good research work is to do the research what you really want to do with not too much money.
All right, a lofty career and a steady job. Thank you very much. And thank you for all your intakes and advice. Thank you, Professor Tan. And next, we will have another Nobel laureate. That's Michael Kremer. He will offer his opinion from a social scientist's point of view. Let's take a listen.
The COVID-19 epidemic is killing people every day that goes by. It's also generating huge economic losses. The International Monetary Fund estimates that losses are $500 billion every month. If you include the long-run health effects of people not getting medical care because health systems are shut down, of people not getting education because of the effects of the epidemic, the effects are likely much larger. Some estimates could go as high as $3.5 trillion per month. That means that any action we can take now to accelerate vaccination has huge benefits. But the world's done a great job developing vaccines and building capacity. Multiple vaccines have been developed which seem to be safe and effective in less than a year. Early in the epidemic, CEPI said that the world could manufacture perhaps 2 to 4 billion doses per year. Publicly announced capacity exceeds 10 billion doses. That means we can vaccinate the world population and end the epidemic much sooner than we would have anticipated. Somewhat surprisingly, some economic calculations suggest that even though we've already installed a lot of capacity, it's worth installing even more. Building capacity to produce an extra billion doses per year has hundreds of billions of economic benefits. If we can produce enough vaccine to vaccinate the world in 8 months rather than 12 months, that's a huge economic win. If you take a vaccine, you're benefiting yourself, but you're also benefiting me, because I'm less likely to be infected. So this is a situation in which, ironically, there's been a lot of discussion in the popular press about the race for a vaccine. Who's going to be first to develop a vaccine? Well, a race is exactly the wrong metaphor. That's what economics teaches us. A gold medal in a race is something that only one person can win. If one person wins, the other person loses. It's a competition. In the case of a COVID-19 vaccine, this is a race that the whole world will win, or the whole world is winning now, because science has advanced, and that's producing vaccines that the whole world will benefit from. Yes, the actual physical vaccine, that's something that only goes to one person at a time. So there is naturally competition about who will get the first doses of this. But the point is, we can produce enough vaccine for everybody in the world. So the scientific development of the vaccine is something that we can celebrate as a human species. As I noted, it's wonderful that we now have these vaccines, but the challenge is to produce more. And I think this is something where I think we've already seen the benefits of international cooperation in vaccines. Many of the vaccines that have been developed are the result of international cooperation. I say that in two senses. The first sense is that individual vaccines are often the product of multinational cooperation. Pfizer, a company in the US, but it also involved a company in Germany, and it also involves a Chinese role through Fosun in Shanghai. I think that's one level of the international cooperation. But there's another level, which is we have many companies working to develop vaccines. And if any of them succeed, and these are companies around the world, we have at least the potential for, if any of those to succeed, it's like many shots on goal. And luckily, we're getting, many of them seem to be succeeding. But even if there was just one, that's something that could potentially benefit the whole world. But to generate the benefits for the whole world, what we need is, we need all the vaccines to go through international regulatory processes so it can be used anywhere. And I think one lesson, if we think about lessons of this to prevent the next pandemic, I think one lesson is we really need to try to develop systems so that wherever a vaccine is developed, it can be developed in a way and according to procedures so that it will be able to receive licenses everywhere in the world. That will require further cooperation, and I think that's a challenge for the world going forward.
So it is a challenge for the entire world. COVID-19 is still ravaging the whole globe. That's why vaccination should be given priorities. And now I'm joined by a scientist who knows how to do international cooperation. Professor Pu Muming is an academician of the Chinese Academy of Sciences and also a world-renowned neuroscientist. So, Professor Pu, as Mr. Kramer mentioned, ideally international cooperation will make our tackling with COVID better. But obviously, there are a lot pieces are missing in international cooperation. So, when the Chinese have been proposing we create a standard procedure, and also Mr. Kramer made the same initiative, do you think it is even possible that we have an international system that works well?
I think the COVID-19 pandemic, that international collaboration is not only necessary, it can be done. Because the world is facing a situation that if the collaboration is not established, nobody survives well. Because you cannot have an isolated country free of COVID-19 while the others have the pandemic, because the world is connected. Right? So in scientific advances at the society level or at the scientist level, there's always the competition. But you also see the situation where there are collaboration. The competition exists because scientists want to be the first. The country wants to be the first.
Yeah.
But when they find something, some goal that cannot be achieved by themselves alone, then collaboration is a must. But we can see many cases of scientific collaboration in the past in big science projects that's multinational, right? Like a Human Genome Project, the Fusion Project, all multinational, because a single nation cannot achieve the goal, right? So here is the case. I am hopeful that there will be an international mechanism when the world is facing a problem that the entire world has to collaborate in order to overcome.
But you have to understand, because you've been doing research in different countries and cultures, the public's attitudes towards science is different across border. How can we be sure that everybody is on the same page?
Right. So I think this is the case in terms of COVID-19. The public understanding of science obviously is an important factor. They know that the virus can be prevented by wearing a mask, to have a social distancing. These are all scientific facts.
But not all people agree in some
cultures. Not all the people agree. So scientific understanding does make a difference, right? But in this case, we can see that a lot of public opinions or their understanding of the facts are biased by politicians, by leadership. Right? In this case, we see the very important role of the leadership in the various societies in terms of the public opinions on the scientific matters. right? Because the leadership is provide example. They provide authority, so that a lot of people would trust. So I think in this case, while not all the populations are scientific literate, they understand everything, then the bias is produced by the leadership.
All right. We'll probably have more discussions on the relations between science and politics later on in our panel discussions. Well, thank you very much, Professor Pu. Well, obviously, science is the engine of the world, and the future of science lies in the hands of the young scientists. And next, we will hear another opinion from Nobel laureate Michael Kosteles. He would like to share with young scientists on this.
My name is Mike Kosteles, and I'm a theoretical physicist at Brown University in the United States, and I'm a condensed matter physicist. In my younger days, I was a very enthusiastic rock climber, and that was actually my main interest, but I managed to do some physics on the side, and those were the days when I did my best work, because the combination of rock climbing and so on, somehow it cleared the mind. You know, I could let my mind wander and think, and that's how I did could come up with these neat ideas, because I was from a stage of my life when I had no responsibilities, and I could let my mind wander. Doing advanced physics or new physics, you are basically wandering in some completely unknown field with no guide, no directions, and nobody's telling you what to do, what not to do, and it's all a matter of luck. And in doing physics research at the frontier, you have to get used to the fact that it's going to be 95% failure, and if you're lucky, 5% success. Because you start a problem, you look at a problem, and either you can't do it, or you do it, but it turns out to be irrelevant. Then you never hear about that problem again. I just happen to be very lucky. This piece of research I did, which was purely theoretical, I thought it was an interesting problem, and I did it for fun. Turned out to be important and have lots of applications. But when I was doing it, I had no idea that it was going to turn out to be important. Well, the only message that I give young scientists is do the science, but do it because you'll find it fun. Because if you don't find it fun, it's not worth doing. Because at a young age, you have lots and lots of choices about what you do, and you should follow what you enjoy. Because if you enjoy a particular field, then you'll be self-motivated and will study it out of your own interest and curiosity. And a lot of kids, their main objective in life is to have fun. That was my main objective when I was young. The way I work is that I think of some small problem that is fun, and sometimes I can solve it, sometimes I can't. And it just happened that one of the problems I solved turned into something big, became important. But I had no idea that I was going to do that when I was doing the work. I did the work because it was fun. The public really has to be educated in the what science does, what it can do, what it can't do, and but that education has to start at a very young age. The best time to start interesting people in science is when they're about 5 years old. And so it seems to me that to get people interested in and to understand science, you have to start education from a very young age. Now, don't push too much, but just try to interest young kids in science.
Yes, indeed, and many scientists have pointed out that your interest is your best teacher and best guide. It will lead you to unexpected discoveries. And now I'm joined by some scientists and also educators to share their perspectives on education and innovation. Let me introduce them to you. They are Mr. Dong Jiahong, Professor Dong Jiahong, an academician of the Chinese Academy of Engineering, and also Professor Zhang Boli, academician of the Chinese Academy of Engineering, and Professor Zhao Wenzhi, academician of the Chinese Academy of Engineering. Let me first ask you, Professor Dong. A lot of people say that science involves risk-taking. As just our scientists pointed out, sometimes you fail. 95% of the time, you could totally fail. So how can we create an environment that tolerate and even embrace failure?
Indeed, scientific research is full of uncertainty. When we do our research, it's like being in a dark room. You don't know what you might touch, and you've no idea what you could get in the end. As the Nobel laureates said, almost all of them started their research out of curiosity. Where would the research lead them? They simply couldn't tell. So within the ecosystem of scientific innovation, we must forge an academic environment that encourages innovation and tolerates failure. Institutionally, China has recently introduced a series of new academic evaluation systems that no longer exclusively focus on educational background, awards, and academic publications. The aim is to encourage original research rather than simply repeating what has already been done. So when we develop these new systems, we need to implement special designs so that errors can be tolerated. Nationwide, we should also nourish a scientific spirit that allows failure.
Great, thank you, Academician Dong. Academician Zhang, thank you. And I know that you are an expert in traditional Chinese medicine, and the Chinese traditional medicine has played a big role in the fight against COVID. So what are the experiences of Chinese traditional medicine in future public health crises?
Traditional Chinese medicine, namely TCM, has a history going back thousands of years. And the sudden outbreak of COVID-19 has caught us unawares. We don't know much about it, and it takes time to decipher the structure of the virus, identify its receptors, and develop vaccines. Meanwhile, the virus spreads fast, so we've taken advantage of TCM and used it based on our syndrome differentiation when there are neither highly effective drugs nor vaccines. We've got effective TCM treatment plans for patients at different stages of COVID-19, from when they are first infected and under strict quarantine, to later stages when they are transferred to temporary treatment centres and when some develop severe symptoms, right up to when they are on the mend. TCM does play a crucial role in controlling the progression of the disease every step of the way, and it's also a highlight of China's fight against the virus. I think the advantages of TCM should continue to be utilised in our future anti-epidemic efforts. This is because when a new type of epidemic unexpectedly breaks out, TCM could buy us some time by controlling its advancement as an early intervention instrument, so that we can afford to wait for vaccines to be developed. So TCM should keep playing its part.
We are proposing the idea of creating a community of science around the world. What do you think Chinese traditional medicine can contribute to that cause?
I'll give you some examples. I've participated in nearly 50 virtual meetings with people in other countries since March. At the very beginning, what they were concerned about were issues like how traditional medicine interventions worked and what the effect would be. Later, their questions were more specifically about treatment, like how to deal with pulmonary fibrosis, how to regulate immunity responses, and so on. And now the focus is mostly on how to overcome mental distress. We exchanged ideas on these issues, and I shared our experience in TCM with them. Another example is the medicine Lianhua Qingwen. It was only available in China prior to COVID-19, but now it is sold in 14 countries as either a medicine, a herbal remedy, or a food additive. There's another TCM drug which is developed by me called Xuanfei Baidu. It's been approved by the US Food and Drug Administration to enter Phase 2 clinical trial.
Is it a TCM formula?
Yes, it is. We work with the University of Southern California to make plans for medicine development and production and have the results assessed in the US. These examples show that TCM has attracted international attention, and there's also been related research worldwide. People across the world are collaborating to tackle epidemic-related problems. I've shared some of my herbal prescriptions with Australia and some other countries for them to make herbal teas. Viruses know no borders, and the pandemic knows no race. Only through international cooperation can the world ride out this crisis. This is my point of view.
Professor Zhao, as we talked about earlier, the challenges faced by human beings, a lot of them requires scientists to cooperate. So, as a scientist, what do you think of the prospects we can overcome those challenges?
I'm pretty optimistic. Like you said in your opening remarks, today's world faces a lot of uncertainties and challenges. So the role of science couldn't be more important at this point. As for its underlying principles, I think the first is to tell you facts as they are. For scientists and technology developers like us, this is a must. You must not cheat. This is very, very important. Fabrications of pseudoscience. This is the first principle. The second is to be innovation-minded. Those who don't make innovative efforts shouldn't call themselves scientists. An expert who you've just interviewed said the same thing. Scientists fail 99% of the time. I'd also like to add that scientists are different from other members of the general public because they spend 99% of their time on solving scientific problems. So they stand the maximum chance of successfully deciphering natural laws. Some people don't believe in science, which I think is a rather inappropriate attitude. The public must have faith in science because this is the only way that human beings can meet all kinds of challenges.
Well, the faith in science and scientists has always been an issue. And why the Chinese have so much confidence in our scientists and science research? And to find the answer of that questions, we've collected the survey results from a social media platform. Let's take a look.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
A scientist. It's amazing.
Many Chinese children want to be scientists. Why is that? Because scientists are awesome, fun, imaginative, and always discovering new things. They developed hybrid rice, increasing crop yields. They have even bred sea rice, which yields 70% more per acre than normal crops on land, with high salinity and pH. They eradicated smallpox and discovered artemisinin, which has anti-malarial properties, saving countless lives. Scientists are also needed to combat the pandemic. In the face of COVID-19, they recommended wearing masks, staying at home, and building Fangcang shelter hospitals. Thanks to their efforts and those of the Chinese people, the pandemic was brought under control quickly and effectively. Why did Chinese respond positively to the scientists' recommendations? Because they believe in science and the future of science. Also, scientific literacy is on the rise in China. More and more people are devoting themselves to scientific research. They have had fruitful research outcomes, with the number of citations continuing to increase, rising from 10th to 2nd place in the world ranking. All of this, of course, has been made possible with China's increasing investment in science popularization and scientific research. Today, scientific research investment in China rivals that of the European Union. You may ask, did these children who wanted to be scientists realize their dreams? Maybe. But does it matter? They might not be scientists, but they embrace science, which is just as good.
Well, science is not just for scientists, it's for everybody. It touches the lives of everyone. Maybe not all of us would become scientists, but we will be empowered and also enlightened by science and scientists one way or another. And that is really what matters. And now we'll have some panel discussions on the work of science. And let me introduce our panelists joining the discussions today. They are Zhang Lingxiu, Fellow of the World Academy of Sciences, Pu Muming, Academician of Chinese Academy of Sciences, Marielza Oliveira, Director of UNESCO's Beijing office, Tan Weihong, Academician of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Li Dehong, Fellow of Academy of Engineering, Singapore, Sun Jianyuan, recipient of the 100 Talents Program, Chinese Academy of Sciences. And also joining us online are Sheldon Lee Glashow, 1979 Physics Nobel Laureate, Aaron Citronova, 2004 Chemistry Nobel Laureate, 2009 Chemistry Nobel Laureate, Didier Queloz, 2019 Physics Nobel Laureate, Professor in Astronomy at the University of Geneva and Professor of Physics at the University of Cambridge. Richard J. Roberts, 1993 Physiology and Medicine Nobel Laureate. So my first question is about science literacy. What exactly is science literacy and why it is important? Why don't we start with you, Ms. Zhang?
Scientists have the responsibility of generating science knowledge, but the general public need to know, understand what the discoveries of the science knowledge tells us and making us how to behave according to scientific knowledge. The general public need to have a better understanding of the discoveries of the science that tells the people, because a lot of cases policy making needed to be science-based, but the implementation of sciences need the general mass population, all the stakeholders, to understand what behind the policy and what behind the policy decisions, and then they can act upon, and we can achieve maximum efficiency in the implementation of science.
And Mr. Tan, do you think science literacy is really that important for policy making?
I think the ability to judge scientifically, judge correctly based on the facts, that's an important aspect of literacy. How to decide different arguments, whether they are trustworthy or not. And that's an important aspect of scientific literacy.
But Ms. Oliveira, it seems there in the world people have different criteria about what is facts right now, because there's the issue of trust in science and scientists. Do you think science literacy has anything to do with people's judgment about facts?
Well, of course, you know, people who are curious about how things work and look at what evidence exists behind who is telling you how things work are the people who really are what we consider scientific literate. The people who really understand a little bit of how the world works, you know, on the basis of evidence that has been built over testing, over time, of different hypotheses. You know, so that's what we call, you know, scientific literacy. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people believe things not on the basis of evidence, but on different bases because of trust. Somebody they trust told them something. Because of faith, you know, it's you know, you have to believe this is the truth, you know, etc. So there are different bases on which people believe things. And nowadays you have this issue of belief that spreads very fast through social media because, you know, you have you know, a critical mass of people telling you or confirming certain, what we call facts, or what they would call facts, but have no real basis except that I heard that somebody told me, and and my friend confirmed that, and so on and so forth. So a matter of trust and repetition has become a basis for truth, which is not really, the way science looks at truth, and belief.
I'd like to hear what scientists have been thinking about this. Why don't we start with Sheldon? Do you think scientists have a role to play here to communicate the correct messages to the public, especially in the year of COVID?
There are many threats to human society, and in truth, science is in a sense responsible for these threats. It was scientists discovered and implemented atomic weapons. It is scientists who made it possible for us to have cars and airplanes, thereby consuming huge amounts of fossil fuels, thereby causing climate change. It is also science that gave rise to the internet and the possibility of instantaneous communication between people and the rapid spread of misinformation, conspiracy theories, pseudoscience, and the like. So clearly it is science having contributed to these threats. It is the responsibility of scientists to address these threats. And the threats are many. Let's focus on COVID for the moment. Brilliant scientists have been working and have developed vaccines, but due to misinformation and due to the viral spread of bad information, this country is, many Americans will refuse to take vaccines. They believe that vaccines are dangerous. There is an anti-vaxxer movement, and a significant portion of Americans have decided that vaccines are dangerous, and they will not take the COVID vaccine, even when it is offered to them. Needless to say, I'm not one of them. I can't wait to get shot with the vaccine. Also, again, we have climate change. Climate change is with us, and it is anthropogenic. It is caused by our performing the world's most dangerous experiment by taking all the carbon out of the ground and putting it into the air and the ocean. This will have a disastrous effect unless we agree that there is a threat, that there is anthropogenic climate change. But again, in my country, there is a significant population that rejects the notion of climate change, that denies that there is such a thing, or agrees that if there is such a thing, it is not caused by burning fossil fuels. So there is so much pseudoscience around us, ranging from astrology to Buddhism, to zombies. From A to Z, we can think of forms of pseudoscience that all reflect the fact that our people have not accepted the role of science, have not accepted the notion of scientific truth. And yes, it is the responsibility of scientists, of every scientist, who, in his own way, her own way, to do something to educate the public, to inform the public, to convince the public, and to make the public trust the scientific community.
And Aaron and Ada, in your part of the world, is it the same case, or there is a cultural context behind public's perception about science?
In Israel, there is high respect to knowledge. This is a general characteristic of the Israelis based on the problems that the Jews had in previous centuries, when they had to sometimes to live from one place to another, and all what they could take is their head. and therefore their knowledge. So knowledge is highly respected, but not always the knowledge that was accumulated scientifically is the winning knowledge. Sometimes it's the public knowledge, and at least there is part of the public that has their own opinion. So I will not relate to global warming and things like this because that's not my field, but I can relate to medicine.
Wow.
And everybody knows, not only in Israel, that life expectancy went up in the world during the last 5-6 centuries by almost 100%, 70%. People were dying from tuberculosis, people were dying from pneumonia before there were antibiotics. So this, everybody understands. Just the minute you come down with the sophistication of vaccination, then not always everybody understands, and then there are different opinions. And in Israel, different opinions are celebrating. Almost everybody has an opinion.
Oh.
Sometimes like somebody else, and sometimes not.
Aaron, what is your opinion? You're a chemistry laureate, but not a lot of people believe in chemistry or science in general. What do you say to them?
Yeah, people, it's very interesting. People tell me that they don't believe in science. I tell them that it's very good. They should believe in God or whatever church. Science is not a religion. Science is a set of testable hypotheses.
But there will be casualties as a result.
Proven or unproven. But I think that scientists, I want to go back to your very previous question, which is very important, and that's the role of scientists. And I think that scientists have two roles in this system, and especially nowadays with all the social networks and the fake news that are running around. One is, of course, to educate the people and to explain them what's going on, what is the advantage of vaccines, you know, telling them that polio disappeared, that many plagues have gone away because of science. So explaining them the basic facts, but mostly I think we have to educate them to go themselves and to check in the reliable and trustworthy sources what is the real truth, rather than listening to all kinds of rumors that leaders, politicians, friends, family members are telling them, to equip them with tools to find out the facts themselves. And by that also to raise their own pride. Hey, guy, I know what's going on. I know the truth. Why? Because I checked it, because I read about it, because I read a trustable source. And I think that in that sense, because we cannot educate the people about GMOs, which can comment, it's not only climate change, it's not only vaccines, it's also GMOs and many other problems that are inflicting us, and all the solutions of which all have to do with science. And I think that we have to equip the public with general tools to educate itself, and also to uproot all kinds of rumors. You know, vaccination is a major issue these days, and people like Wakefield in the UK that led the whole campaign against vaccination because he blamed it for causing autism, or the Japanese government that came up with rumors about the vaccination against HPV, the human papillomavirus-induced cancer, and they stopped vaccinating the girls and the women, and tens of thousands of new cases evolved and erupted against in Japan, causing death of at least 5,000 women since it was stopped. So I think that educating the people about facts, but also directing them for the right sources.
Science education and communication is the key there. Because science is important as people can be better informed so that they can make better decisions. So we have Okimura Kazuki, a Japanese, also special consultant to the Japan Science and Technology Agency, to share his views on science education and communication.
コロナ禍の影響で Because of the coronavirus, the global economy has weakened and globalization is facing the headwinds. We are confronted with the problem of global balance. We should unite in this difficult time. There's an old saying in China, as long as we are of one mind, we can move Mount Tai. Only with unity, cooperation, and mutual reliance can we overcome the hardship together. Innovation is a new engine driving global economic development. Scientific and technological innovation is essential to address the common problems facing the world. Science will develop in an open environment, and knowledge will be more valuable only when it is utilized. The science and technology industry should establish an open and applicable cooperation mechanism to promote balanced development and to open up science. In order to cope with global issues, we need the wisdom of all human beings. We need to greatly improve the science literacy of the people in the world.
Yes, opens up science to the public is important. To equip the public with knowledge of science is important. But the problem is how? Mr. Tan, science is a vast amount of knowledge and information, complicated, not easy to understand for average person like me. So you scientists have a job to make it understandable for the public. Maybe there is something that you failed as a scientist.
I think, this is really the public education of science. And for example, when I was a professor back in the US, and I always invite high school students and then college students to my lab. That's one way. And then I go to this elementary school and middle school to tell them what my science is. Like, after I got back to China, and in the last 3 years or so, and I went to at least the 20 middle schools and youth club to talk about my science. For example, today I'm talking about healthy China, and this is our country's mission for the next 30 years, and how to really prepare our country to be to do better in health. And then one of the most important things I tell people is about the molecular medicine. Then how do you make people, average people, to understand molecular medicine? And saying that actually the most unknown part of the world for human beings today is humans ourselves. And then 500 years ago, Da Vinci opened our heart and then get to know our body consists of organs. After we got microscopes, then we know the organs are made of cells. Then we got to know that the cells are made of molecules. And then, in order to really understand a human disease or human development or our biological function, we have to understand it from the molecular level. For example, that's what I call molecular medicine. And the molecular medicine actually is understand the mechanisms of disease on the molecular level, diagnose the disease on the molecular level, and cure the disease on the molecular level, as well as prevent the disease on the molecular level. If you tell those in such a way, I think most of the people can understand the basic principle, not necessarily the details. Then they really feel excited about, okay, we really have to understand molecules. And then a lot of chemists, you can see that the Nobel Prize winners, and they really work from this molecular side to understand biological processes, as well as how human disease originates and how we can cure and how we can prevent.
When you are communicating knowledges about molecular science to different people in different countries, is it different? For example, here in China and the United States, are they more acceptable or more challenging?
I think most of these young people, they are pretty much the same, no matter whether it's in the US or in China. And I, for example, like three months ago, and I went to a youth club. I told them that, okay, all these young people, they are trying to accumulate and knowledge and accumulate information. And if we scientists do not go there to provide them with all this information about science, about scientists, then all what they have is about the singers and sports players. All of those people are great, but we need to have diversity. We need to have scientists ourselves go to the field, tell people that the science is great, science is beautiful, and the science can make us to have a better life.
Professor Lee, would you please share your experience and why scientists don't always do that and they don't do the job well as we wished?
Well, I think science being the scientist, they all have the caliber to make the difficult things to be understood by the general public.
They all have that capacity?
I think they should have. If they do not have, I doubt. Based on my personal experiences, I think most of the time they have, but they may not think they have that kind of caliber. So I try to tone down the discussion a little bit. Say, for example, we all talk about the science literacy. And we talk about to educate people to have the scientific thinking. I like to use my personal life experience to share. My eldest son, I have 4 children. My eldest son is now in his secondary school, and he's in the IB program. So he's at the juncture of choosing whether go for the literature or go for the more science-oriented or more engineering-oriented or more social science-oriented. At the end, he did not come to me. At the end, he chose to study science. And it triggered some worries to the school teachers. So the school teacher wrote an email to me, Professor Lee, your son so-and-so, and he chose to study in science programs. You being the engineering professors, perhaps you need to know, and maybe you like to talk to him. So I interpret that one as science may not be the good choice. So at the end, since now I'm full-time working in China, so I call my son, and he told me that, I asked him, why would you choose science? Tell me your reason. He gave me one very striking reason. And his reason was, science makes sense.
Science makes sense.
And I said, okay, that's good. Okay, but why? He said, well, only the things make sense can be called a science. And the science makes sense. And I said, where did you get that kind of thinking? He said, well, he being a teenager, he said that's what he believes. So I think if the teenager can...
But I doubt your son is the enlightened minority.
So, well, I think one of the things in today's conference is enlightenment. I think the science can enlighten our life. So I think maybe we talk about the science in some very heavy weight, okay? But science is actually, in my personal interpretations, science is the way of scientific thinking. Is a way of systematic thinking, so that we can make the life different. Yeah. But the moment I say make the life different, I think it becomes heavy again. So how to educate people to have this scientific thinking? I think the important things, I do not want to use educate. I like to use to equip people. With the systematic thinking of our day-to-day life. So that's the basic, that's the fundamental of science.
Okay, and Professor Sun, you belong to 100 Talents program. That is the elitist scientists in China, the young enterprising scientists. But the problem is we need more than 100, probably thousands, tens of thousands, even millions of them. How can we have more?
Well, I think that scientific education, I think, is important, and for us, I think it's our duty to go out of the university and go to middle school, even to the communities and societies, to tell people what is the science, because the nature of science is the seeking for the truth, and how the way of doing science, and how to discriminate the general non-scientific notion and the result from scientific research. And also, in that way, I think more and more people will trust science and trust scientists. Then they will hope to be, for these kids, they will want to be scientists. And this is the way I think we should do about that. Of course, the curiosity is always very important, but I think the curiosity is only one part of science. Sometimes science is very important. Say, nowadays we have COVID-19, and science is the only way we can depend on. So how can we do? Depends on literature? Depends on politics? No, only science. If you look at the history, and only science can generate the vaccine or something can treat a lot of pandemic disease, right? So this is the way I think that we can tell these young kids that science is not only a curiosity, but also very important. And this is I can think of. Some of the young people say that it's very hard to find a job in science, but we have to face on it. You know, not only in China, but internationally, for one faculty position, there will be 100 competitors over there. So we have high criteria, but still there is quite a lot of people can be a scientist. But only thing is that I'm concerned about the readiness. Are you ready to be a principal investigator or something like that?
But there is another thing that is happening around the world. That is people's faith or beliefs or confidence in science. I'd like to our guests, our Nobel laureates. Didier, people in different countries, they have different views about science. And we have seen a rise of anti-intellectualism in the US during the pandemic. First of all, why do you think people are suddenly anti-intellectualism?
It's a very interesting questions, and I would say that the questions of the science literacy is a matter of survival for species. So we should really take that very seriously, and that's something that we should all try to understand better. I don't think there is a single answer to that. There is certainly something which is a fact, that is, we are living in a society that is absolutely knowledge-based. Anything we do in our daily life is a result of the knowledge that we have built up on the science, from the way we communicate, from the way we just travel, from the way we just living, the food we have, everything is a result of a scientific attitudes based on the fact. We are, in a way, we are overwhelmed by the science every day. And it's fascinating to see that with this fact that you can see on your daily life, just by the fact that you can survive, extend your lifetime, seems not to be enough. So to me, there is something very profound behind this. It's just not a matter of education here. We're touching on something very profound, is the fact that there is a fraction of the society that is disconnected from this reality. And in a way, they are rejecting the facts. They don't want to hear about that. I mean, whatever you want to just talk to them, you will not go to anywhere because they're not willing to experience this rational element. I don't think it's a result of the social network. I think the easy access to the information applies on both ends. We have a way easy access for everybody to the science, to the result, but at the same time, you get also access to a lot of fake information. So when you look back about the history, it was already the case at the time of the Greek. You had conspiracy theory, you had fake news, you had misinformation. It's just the way it was much slow to go spread. But you could see that as well. It has always existed. I think, to me, there is something even more deeper here, which is the assumption that we have implicitly with the science, which is born in the 18th century, 18th and 19th century, which is the connections that science means progress. Everybody is making this link that, oh, science is good for us. Science is good for the progress. In a way, you implicitly assume that anything science will do will be good, and you will do something good at that. And then this statement is valid for some part of it, but it's not valid for all of it. And I think it was briefly mentioned with the thermonuclear weapon early on. And I think this is really the key point here. We are not anymore in this way of thinking. I mean, a part of the society doesn't believe that science, whatever its fact build, is of any good for progress. And then they're rejecting it. And it's a rejection of the reality based on the fact that this connection doesn't work. So I think, depending on your country, depending on your educations, depending on the society you're living, you may have a different relation to the progress and the concept of believing to the future. And I think this is where science should be a little bit careful and maybe should back up a little bit. Science is, as it was mentioned, experiencing the knowledge based on fact. But actually, what we're doing is we are using a very profound capability we have, which is just being curious. So we are amazingly curious, and that's one of the key features of our species. Now, the fact we're being curious and we're discovering the law of nature and making progress doesn't mean it's of any good. And I think global warming right now is a disaster, and that's a result of the science. So what we have to work on right now, it's not about only educating people what is science, but maybe it's to back up with this idea, science in progress, and try to go back to the more philosophical statements that the knowledge is something that is of great use for the society, and it's essential for the future of the society. But maybe the way we experience this knowledge, the way we build this knowledge, is absolutely out of control. And I think this is a problem that we have as a scientist. We're doing great stuff, but it's not always for good.
And Richard, the United States has the most advanced science research and probably accomplished scientists. But there's a large part of the population who don't believe in what the scientists have been saying on climate change, on COVID vaccination, on other methods of public health. Why so?
Well, I think very often it's because politicians have agendas that are very different from scientists and from what is necessarily good for the general public. And one of the things we've discovered in the US is that money rules everything. And as soon as something is profitable, as soon as people can make a lot of money from something, they usually choose that instead of worrying about whether this is good for the population, whether it's good for humanity, whether it has good social benefits. And I think this is a big problem. We have quite severe problems in the US with spreading false information, both from politicians, but also from celebrities.
But isn't it the responsibility of leaders in your country to know better and decide better?
Well, if they were actually leading in order to help the population, yes. But unfortunately, that's not the way the political system works. The way the political system works is that the people who have power try to shift the agenda so that they come out looking good, as they think, and they come out making a lot of money if they possibly can. And I think we have to really seriously think about how we might overhaul the entire political system. I just do not think we are doing a very good job here in the US. I think there are many other countries that have done better. I would point particularly in the case of COVID to countries like New Zealand, where they have a very inspired leader. I would note she's a lady, and the first thing she did was to listen to the scientists, to ask the scientists for advice, to figure out how to deal with this crisis. And what has happened in the US, for instance, is the scientists have been put in the background and other interests have taken over.
All right, let's come back to this country. It seems the Chinese view science and scientists in a different way than many Americans. So why is that so, Ms. Zhang?
Well, I don't think it's, I think it's just being said that science is the discovery of the truth and the nature. But how people transmit the science into public, it carries a different weight. In China, I think the Chinese have a central government whose wholehearted kind of efforts is trying to make sure the general public is benefiting from the science. So they don't carry their own kind of individual or private will in transforming the scientific knowledge to the society. I think
so
that's
the political agendas are different.
Of course, political agenda are different because scientific knowledges are scientific knowledges everywhere. Truth are the truth. But how you tell the truth to the public has a lot to do of the weight you carry. You know, whether you are in the interest of general public, whether you are interested in a certain group of elite, that really matters how you transmit the scientific knowledge to the general public. That's my view.
And Marielsa, earlier Richard mentioned that politics is sometimes in the way when scientists want trying to reach out and to make the messages across. Probably different countries have different situation. What is your view of how can politics and science serve better our society, and what needs to be happening?
Well, there are a lot of things that need to happen for science and politics to work better together for the benefit of humankind. You know, first, I fully agree. You know, science needs to be a problem solver that looks first at what is the ethical consequences of scientific discovery and innovation out of that, rather than just looking at the problem. You know, so, you know, looking a bit more at the consequences of scientific discovery. Particularly when we're talking about the transformation of scientific, basic science into applied science, the technology side, you know. Because basic science, for example, splitting the atom is you know, excellent. But the applications of that, you know, from a bomb to, you know, to radiotherapy, medicinal, you know, radiotherapy, those are very different pursuits, you know, and they need scientists too, you know. But the choice of which of those two fields to pursue needs to be an ethical choice that is embedded in how scientists think. You know, so yeah, scientists need to be better communicators also, because, you know, it's not their job to make the decisions of what consequences to impute in society. You know, if you do, you know, energy research, for example, you know, new sources of energy and etc. Or, of course, you know, there are consequences to that. If you're looking at green energy versus fracking fossil fuels, you know, there are very different consequences to the environment and to the lives of people, and who pays for those consequences? You know, and so scientists need to be aware of that and actually communicate better with the politicians who are the decision makers representing the people on the choices they make.
As you said, the world is a complicated place. There are economy, politics, social values involved.
Yes.
So as a representative of international organization, are you an optimist about, will the world be a better place because of the cooperation between different sectors?
I'm always an optimist, otherwise I wouldn't work for the United Nations. You know, but absolutely, I think that you know, we need to embrace, you know, values that you know, enable us to cooperate, you know, with tolerance and respect to each other, to think about, you know, those who are less endowed, you know, with opportunities and with resources than we are, and think of how, you know, we can work for the benefit of all, you know, not just for a group of people. And, you know, in science itself needs to do that better. For example, I'm looking around and seeing a lot of young men. Raise your hand if you are a young woman scientist present in this room. Raise your hand.
There are a lot.
Raise your hand.
They're very shy. They don't want to raise their hand.
Do we have one handle? So yeah.
So you think the females are underrepresented in science?
They're underrepresented. Just like, persons with disabilities are underrepresented. We lost one of the greatest scientific minds of our time a few years ago, a couple of years ago, Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
Persons with disabilities, and incredibly, intelligent and capable, but we are still treating, persons with this kind of talent as less. Giving them less opportunity, less resource to do research. Same thing for young scientists. They have less opportunity and less resource. And they should have, all of us behind them to help society, nurture their talents and enable them to really contribute.
Thank you very much. I hope I have more time, but I don't. Thank you for your wonderful insights and analysis, and thank you for all the Nobel laureates.
Yeah.
Science is a collective endeavor. It creates fascinating technologies. It ensures a healthy life, and sometimes it also gives us answers about the mysteries of the universe. But it is not a cure-all. It does not promise success. It promises truth. Nothing but the truth. But that itself is good enough for us living in this uncertain world. And with that, we come to the end of this TV forum, Science in an Uncertain World. I'm Zoe in Beijing. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.